Imagine waking up in complete darkness. No windows, no fresh air, no idea whether it is day or night. You stretch out your hand, but all you touch is cold stone. The silence is broken only by the sound of dripping water somewhere in the distance. Every breath feels heavier than the last. For countless people throughout history, this wasn't a nightmare, it was reality. Throughout history, prisons were rarely places of rehabilitation. They were designed to crush hope, erase identity, and make escape impossible. Some prisoners never saw sunlight again. Others disappeared without anyone knowing what became of them. Today, we're exploring some of the darkest prisons humanity has ever built. Let's begin in medieval Europe. Hundreds of years ago, castles weren't just homes for kings and nobles. Hidden beneath many of them were underground dungeons. These dungeons were damp, freezing, and almost completely dark. Prisoners were often thrown inside with little food and even less water. Many cells were so small that a person couldn't even stand up straight. Imagine spending weeks, months, or even years in a room where every wall pressed against you. Every sound echoed endlessly. Time itself seemed to stop. The purpose wasn't simply to keep someone locked away. It was to break their spirit. Some prisoners were chained directly to the walls. Others were left alone in total isolation. Without conversation or daylight, many slowly lost their sense of reality. Back then, surviving the prison often depended on whether someone outside was willing to pay for your release. If no one came, you stayed, sometimes forever. Now imagine a prison even worse. Not beneath a castle, but beneath the streets of an entire city. In ancient Rome, one prison became infamous across the empire, known today as the Mamertine Prison. It was built to hold Rome's most dangerous enemies. The prison had two underground chambers. The lower chamber could only be reached through a hole in the ceiling. Think about that for a moment. A prisoner wasn't led through a doorway. They were lowered into darkness from above. Once inside, climbing back out was almost impossible. The air was damp. The stone walls trapped moisture. The smell was overwhelming. Many prisoners knew they would never leave alive. For some, the prison wasn't a waiting room before freedom. It was the final destination before execution. Imagine hearing footsteps above you every day, wondering if today would be your last. But history wasn't finished creating terrifying prisons. Far to the north stood massive fortresses surrounded by icy waters. Escaping wasn't just difficult, it was nearly impossible. Powerful rulers used these fortress prisons to isolate political prisoners. The freezing climate became another prison wall. Even if someone escaped the building itself, they still had to survive freezing temperatures, rough seas, hunger, exhaustion. Nature became the guard, winter became the jailer. Many prisoners eventually accepted a painful truth. Escape existed only in dreams. Isolation itself became one of history's greatest punishments. Modern science has shown that prolonged loneliness can deeply affect the human mind. People deprived of conversation, sunlight, and social contact often begin experiencing anxiety, depression, confusion, even hallucinations. Ancient rulers didn't need scientific studies to understand this. They simply observed what happened. The longer someone remained completely alone, the weaker they became. In some prisons, guards rarely spoke to prisoners at all. Days blended into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. Eventually, many prisoners forgot what normal life even felt like. Another terrifying feature found in many historical prisons was uncertainty. Sometimes prisoners weren't told why they had been arrested. They didn't know when they would be released. They didn't know if anyone even remembered they existed. Imagine counting days without a calendar, trying to remember faces that slowly faded from memory, trying to keep hope alive when every passing day looked exactly the same. For many prisoners, the greatest punishment wasn't the chains. It was not knowing what would happen next. Hope slowly disappeared. Without hope, time itself became the enemy. Some prisons were intentionally built underground. Without sunlight, the human body quickly loses its natural rhythm. Sleep becomes irregular. Days and nights become impossible to distinguish. Even healthy people can become mentally exhausted under these conditions. Now imagine enduring that for years, with cold stone beneath you, darkness around you, silence everywhere. For countless prisoners throughout history, this was everyday life. Perhaps the most frightening part is that many of these prisons still exist today. Their walls remain standing, their iron doors still creak open. Visitors' walk through silent corridors where countless prisoners once waited in fear. Each stone seems to hold a story of survival, a story of injustice, or a story that ended within those walls forever. Standing inside these places today is a reminder of how power has been used throughout history, not only to rule people, but also to control them through fear. But these ancient dungeons were only the beginning. In the centuries that followed, governments created prisons that became even larger, even harsher, even more terrifying. Some were built on isolated islands, others were surrounded by oceans. Some became symbols of fear recognized across the entire world, and the stories behind them are even darker. As civilizations grew more advanced, prisons became larger, more secure, and in many ways even more terrifying. Let's continue our journey. Imagine standing on a rocky island surrounded by freezing water. The waves crash against steep cliffs. There are no bridges, no nearby villages, only endless water in every direction. Throughout history, rulers discovered that an island could become the perfect prison. Even if a prisoner managed to escape the walls, they still faced the impossible challenge of crossing dangerous waters. One of the world's most famous examples was Alcatraz. Located on a small island in San Francisco Bay, it held some of America's most dangerous criminals. The prison was protected not only by guards and steel bars, but also by icy water, powerful currents, and constant surveillance. Officially, no prisoner was ever confirmed to have escaped successfully and survived. Many tried, most failed. For those locked inside, the city's skyline could be seen in the distance. Freedom was visible, but completely out of reach. That may have been one of the cruelest parts. Another prison gained a terrifying reputation during the 20th century. Deep within the Soviet Union's vast prison camp system, countless prisoners were sent to remote, frozen regions. These labor camps became known as the Gulag. Prisoners were forced to work under incredibly harsh conditions. Many spent long hours cutting timber, digging mines, building roads. Winter temperatures dropped far below freezing. Food was often limited. Exhaustion became a daily companion. For many, surviving each day became the only goal. The prison walls weren't always made of stone. Sometimes the endless wilderness itself became the prison. History also reminds us, not every prisoner was guilty. In different countries and different time periods, innocent people were imprisoned because of politics, mistaken identity, false accusations, or simply being on the wrong side of those in power. Some spent years trying to prove their innocence, others never got the chance. This is one of history's most heartbreaking lessons. A prison is powerful, but when justice fails, that power can become dangerous. Perhaps the greatest prison wasn't built from bricks at all. It was fear. Throughout history, some rulers used terrifying prisons to send a message to everyone else. The goal wasn't only to punish the people inside, it was also to frighten the people outside. When stories spread about prisoners disappearing into dark cells, many people became too afraid to speak against those in authority. In that way, prisons became tools of control, as much as places of confinement. Today, many of these historic prisons have become museums. Visitors walk through empty cells. They see rusted chains, heavy iron doors, narrow corridors, small windows that allowed almost no sunlight inside. The buildings are silent now, but the silence feels different. It carries the memories of thousands of lives that once passed through those walls. Every scratch on a stone wall, every worn staircase, every locked cell reminds us that history was lived by real people, not characters in a story. Fortunately, many countries have changed how they think about prisons. Modern justice systems in many parts of the world focus not only on punishment, but also on rehabilitation. The goal is to help prisoners return to society as better citizens whenever possible. Education programs, job training, mental health support. These approaches recognize that lasting public safety often depends on reducing future crime, not simply making prison conditions harsher. Of course, prison remains a serious punishment, but history has shown that cruelty alone does not create justice. Looking back at these dark prisons teaches us something important. The strength of a civilization isn't measured by how severely it punishes people. It's measured by how fairly it treats them. History remembers great inventions, powerful empires, but it also remembers the suffering hidden behind locked doors. The darkest prisons remind us what can happen when power is left without accountability. Imagine being the last prisoner to leave one of these ancient cells. The heavy door finally opens. Fresh air reaches your face for the first time in years. Sunlight feels almost unfamiliar. The outside world has changed. People have grown older. Cities have transformed. Life has continued without you. That moment reminds us of something we often take for granted: freedom. It's one of the greatest gifts anyone can have. Most of us wake up each morning able to choose where we go, who we speak to, and how we spend our day. For countless prisoners throughout history, even those simple choices were impossible. The walls of these prisons still stand as warnings from the past. They remind us that fear can build prisons, power can fill them, but wisdom comes from remembering why they existed and ensuring that history's darkest mistakes are never repeated. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed exploring the hidden stories of history, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more fascinating journeys into humanity's most mysterious and unforgettable past.